So one of the things that I'm striving with my kids is to be able to just kind of find ways to keep them grounded.
This episode is brought to you by Big Storage Ventures. We are now inviting you to team up and partner alongside us. We bring our experience hunting storage deals and maximizing the self-storage asset to provide our partners with cash flow, tax benefits, and appreciation, all in one recession-resistant asset. Leverage our sister company, Big Ben's Moving Service, to fill your facility and give you an edge over the competition. Reach out to bigstorageventures@gmail.com or DM Big Storage Ventures on Instagram to team up.
Super excited for today's episode. We got Dr. Jon Baugh. He is an ER doctor in Southern Utah and a very successful businessman. You're going to love today's show.
3 things he focused on was not avoiding hard work, pain, and being okay with delayed gratification. And lots of other golden nuggets that we think you're really going to have some big takeaways.
It's a valuable tool for you to be able to speak business, but you can see the evidence right here, because what it does is it helps you be a valuable a part of a team, right? Mm-hmm. And so because you bring those different things together, you bring someone who's the thought guy, the visionary guy, mm-hmm. and the process guy, the money guy, and all of those things go together. And so it's like, well, this is the Big Ben real estate aspect,
right?
And then, but that's one of the adventures that you guys probably will end up being together, right? Because then you're like, well, now you're putting together parts of a team that can do multiple things. Yeah. So I mean I think it's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad that like Ben was saying, this kind of like I started to wake up like, whoa, I didn't want to do this the rest of my life. I wanted to use this to pivot somewhere, and it's like all falling into place right now. So, well,
two observations I make, right? So this Mr. Lindsay, like he said, his resume is like the top. He sold half of Overstock.com for
You nodded,
50 mil.
I
You've
know
heard
that
of him.
he's around here, but I don't know him personally.
Yeah. Okay.
So his son was playing tennis the same time my little brother Matt was playing tennis, and he gave me the same advice because I had said I was only like I'm only a year older, so I was a year ahead in college. I was like, what college degree should I get, business or accounting? And he's like, oh, accounting for sure. Mm-hmm. Like it's way more valuable. Like you'll be way more valuable to your employer, or if you start your own business, then you have such an advantage. And I took the basic accounting class. I'm like, no, I'm not an accountant. But so I think it was the smarter degree to get. But one thing that I will say about accounting is, like you said, it's like a river. Once you get in, it's hard to get out. Mm-hmm. It's the golden handcuffs, because you start to be able to make more money than you could doing anything else. So like with me, with a business, like I got my business degree, obviously I just naturally did like entrepreneurship. But if I was in accounting or some other high level employee position, it would be so much harder to get out, because you're going to have to work for years to recoup your income. I don't know.
Yeah, but what's interesting though is because you say, well, naturally I went into the entrepreneur side, but I don't think that's naturally it. I think that speaks to your personality, right? Who you are and what sort of your original goals were, because it's the same thing that I tell med students or PA students or residents that I work with. I say, just because you get a certain degree, you get a business degree. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to go into middle management. I'm going to go into working for a corporation. And you said, well, no, naturally, I'm going to go into entrepreneurship. This is the same thing I say to students. I say, well, you're going to become a physician, or you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a PA, you're going to be an NP. But that doesn't mean if you don't want to, you don't have to just work in a clinic somewhere. You have to just keep your mind open and do what you want and figure out how to make you money, right? And maybe you're like, maybe I don't want to be like hugely successful. Maybe I'm not concerned about that. Maybe I want a nice 9-to-5 job, and that's where I'm going to be happy every day. And I don't want the responsibility of running a business and doing payroll and worrying about health insurance and all those things. But maybe you're like, hey, those things are fine. Not only that, but I can hire somebody to be able to do those things. But it's very much a mindset that says, do I want to do something this outside of the box a little bit? Do I want to sit in a cubicle, which maybe you do,
Right.
or do I not? And do I want to be an accountant, or do I want to team up with one of my friends and be an entrepreneur? Right? And those are very different paths, and they're for different people, but each bring like happiness, and that's really what it is. I think like excitement, happiness. Maybe you just want to go in, punch the clock, maybe have your weekends off, and work 40 hours a week and have vacation, or maybe you want to be like, hey, I'm gonna work 70 hours a week and grow something that's really fun and exciting. But the realization, in fact, a good friend of mine right now, they're just starting a business, and the realization that it's going to be 80 hours a week
lot of work.
is sort of like a little bit of a new concept to them.
Yeah.
Even though he's energetic and exciting and fun, I think that realization that when you start a business, it is 2 feet deep into the pool if you're going to make it work.
Absolutely. What industry is it in? Is it the medical industry or?
No. His is actually in sort of an adjunct to construction. So it's like flooring and closets and garages and stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah. Service and
Yeah.
construction. Definitely.
I love the parallels you made to the medical field with those students. I can relate a lot to that because I've been there where it's like, it's actually super chill when you just, in a way, to just go clock in, clock out. You don't think about anything after that. You don't worry about anything like that. You just, you take your vacation days, and I mean, it's just a different thing. And I'm not saying that's I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. And like you said, there's a lot of people where it's like, that's all I want. Like, it's all the stress I can handle, and I'm happy with that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that it was, it depends on that person and what's going to make them happy and fulfilled.
Yeah, and it's just a perspective too, and it's also sort of the realization of sort of looking outside the box, like we talked about before. So before I went to medical school, I was still working in the medical industry. I was working as a surgical tech in the operating room in Salt Lake at LDS Hospital. At the time, it was the big Trauma One hospital. I was doing my undergrad at the University of Utah, and I mean, I really loved that job. If I didn't know that I already wanted to go to medical school at the time, I would have been really happy working, 36, 40 hours a week, doing cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You get a retirement, you work for 40 years, you retire, and you maintain a comfortable lifestyle. And I knew guys that did that. They followed that whole route, and I've stayed in touch with them, some of them, and they've really enjoyed it. For me, I knew I just wanted to do more. And one of the problems, I think maybe Ben can relate. I don't know you enough yet, Kallan, but that I want to do more sort of is this perpetual thing too, right? So, hey, you start a business, you have a job, you're like, hey, there's another problem to be solved. Let's do something more. And it's always like these mores that can be done. So it's sort of a blessing and a curse, right? To be able to say, hey, there's always more things. Building businesses or solving problems or just being part of something else that's going on.
And that's a key why you have a journey mindset instead of you're not worried about the destination, because if it's like, oh, my goal is to do this.
Yeah.
And that's why I have this problem when people ask me my 5 to 10 year goal. I have a lot of answers, but I also have a lot of like, well, I could tell you, but I don't want to limit myself.
Yeah, let's see where it goes.
If you asked me 5 years ago to put like a cap on to tell you my 5-year goal, like I would not have imagined where it turned out. So you want to make the goals, but I'm just saying that more mindset that you're bringing up is very interesting, because it's like if you're going through the day, and that's why it's important too to always be happy with what you do. That's a good measure of like if you're working in the right spot, because if you're not happy, then you're going to want a finish line. But if you are happy, then you're okay abundantly growing forever. You know what I mean? So like my nephew, I was giving Daniel, Rob's son, a ride home today. He was helping us clean out some storage units. And he's like, hey, what age do you think you could retire? He's like, could you retire at 40? I'm like, I'm not going to, because it's not the point. I'm happy with my work, with everything that's going on. So
yeah, I think individuals with that mindset, right? Because I get asked that a lot too. Like, well, when do you think you're going to retire? And my ex-wife used to say, well, he's probably not going to retire. It's probably like he'll probably just do something different.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true. It's like, well, what am I going to be doing next? And then obviously, I will say this. I'm 45 now, and so your perspective changes too. Because I would say 5 years ago, I'd be like, I'm going to be doing 27 things. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do 10 things, right? When I retire. But also, as I've changed, it's kind of like, well, what does retirement mean? And I think it does mean at a certain point slowing down and changing what you're doing, because I don't want to be grinding forever, but I want to be doing fun things. And so that's some of what's changed for me recently, is trying to be involved with a little more passive investment opportunities, or being over the past few years, I've said, well, it's kind of like we were talking about before, have a team that I'm a part of a team, and I'm a part of a couple of different teams that are doing different things, whether it's in medicine or investment or whatever it is. And as it happens to be, most of the things that I get involved with are medical related, because of my background and my training and my experience. And that's kind of like we mentioned that. I mentioned that to physicians and residents and nurses even. I'm like, use that experience that you have, because once you're a physician, for instance, especially, that opportunity to be able to be involved in things grows exponentially. That business side of medicine opens up, and you get to be a chief medical officer, or you get to be the medical director, or you get to do something in that realm where you're involved in the business side of medicine. And maybe it doesn't have anything much to do with patient care anymore. Maybe it has to do with medical real estate. I know guys that are doing that, and so there's a lot of areas where you say, well, this is my background, this is my experience, and just sort of as you pivot off of that a little bit. Use that background, use that experience, and use that degree that you've got. Because once you're a physician or even a nurse, then gosh, then there comes with it a little bit of, I don't know, kind of clout, right? That says, hey, well, this guy's a doctor. And so you can use all of those, whether it's having a business degree, or whether it's being an accountant, whatever it is that is your background, you just use that strength. That's been my experience, to be able to use the experience to be able to go into whatever you want to do, even if it is not the path that you started down, and just find the things that be happy, like you were talking about. Be happy every day, right?
Well, your pivots, correct me if I'm wrong, but your most successful business ventures have been they've been medical background, where you basically leverage your medical background into a business opportunity. Yeah. And I think that's key when you're thinking about pivots, right? They need to be connected. No one pivots from like being a doctor to, you could, but like typically they're not going to do a business in like restaurants or random stuff. They're going to go into, okay, let's explore, the cosmetic medicine. Let's explore this side of medicine. So you're going to branch out into different businesses.
No, you're absolutely right.
From right where you started.
And one of the reasons for that, so you talk about coming from being a physician. So, I'm always, whether it's just online, or whether it's Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, there's always opportunities that people are talking about what they're doing now. And sort of that golden handcuffs, right? Even I see all these guys doing Amazon selling and all, and I think, gosh, that's kind of fun and it's exciting. A lot of it's automated, and it's just still cool business stuff. But you think, well, it doesn't make sense for me to be able to go and earn $500 a day, right? Because you're like, well, gosh, that's a pay cut to be able to go. But for a lot of people, that $500 a day is a step up in the right direction. And so I think it just also matters like where you're coming from, as far as what your next pivot is. Does it make sense to be able to pivot into something that is going to make you less money, if it's going to require a bunch of time, or do you say, hey, because of my experience, I'm gonna have a broader range of things. I don't, Amazon, FBO doesn't make sense for me,
right?
Unless you go big. But being able to go into some sort of adjacent medical industry, like IV infusions or something like that, or psychiatric hospitals, those type of things make sense because of the fact that I'm already a high income earner, and then so you pivot into something because you have greater capital to be able to start with, and as you've seen with your additional adventures right now, having a bigger platform below you and having a greater capital at the beginning of these new ventures allows you to be able to do bigger and better things.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
And tell us, because you're wired in that way. Has that been your nature since you were young, or when did you pick up kind of that entrepreneurial side of you? Where in your beginnings do you first start to trace that?
I think pretty young. My dad was kind of an entrepreneur, had a couple of small businesses while I was growing up. So I remember seeing that. Maybe similar to a lot of kids more my age. I think now there's maybe less of this, but it was kind of like, man, I had a paper route because I wanted to earn money when I was 12 years old, and I wanted to be doing these things. I remember working for a small business, doing silk screening t-shirts over in Hurricane where I grew up when I was 15, because I'm like, man, I want to get a job. I want to be earning some money. And one of the things to remember, and I think a big driving factor for me, is I grew up dirt floor poor, dirt floor poor. And I didn't want to stay poor. And so some of that motivation was to be able to change my life, that change who I am and change my lifestyle. One of the reasons too that I've been involved in multiple things is because I sort of always have this underlying fear, just this little bit of fear that I'm gonna reach an age where I want to retire and not be able to retire like my parents. And so it's like, how many different things should I be doing or have going to be able to retire, or to be able to be comfortable at a time where I don't want to be working every day. Right. And so it's like business ventures and investment, and whether it's stocks and bonds, or whether it's gold, or whether it's crypto, or whether it's it's investing in other business opportunities and putting money in startups. All those things have over the past decade, I would say, been a little more diversifying for me. But I think that that initiation of thinking about entrepreneur is really, really young. In fact, it's funny because I think that it is not genetic, but it's definitely familial, right? So you see people around you doing these things. I know this happens with your brothers right now, as they're watching you be successful in your entrepreneurship. They're saying, well, how can I use that experience? I know that if I look at my kids, I've got 3 daughters and 1 boy, and my 16-year-old is super smart, and she's going to school, and she's going to graduate a couple months after she turns 16. She's going to graduate from high school.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we're kind of figuring out what she's going to do. And she's working for me in the ER as a scribe, and she thinks she wants to go into psychology, but I don't know. I don't know where she's going to end up. My middle daughter has kind of a little bit more my personality, with looking into all of these different areas, and she's just a busy girl, and she's always looking at opportunities to do stuff. If I can get her to be able to look at opportunities to be able to do business, that would be great. But she's just she's a sort of a busy mind like mine. Yeah. And then my 11-year-old, I think for 2 years, she said, "Dad, when can I start a business? What can I do to earn money?"
That's music to your ears.
It makes me so happy. It makes me deeply happy because she's like, "What can I do?" And so we've talked about things, and it's funny because I'll send all my kids, all my daughters, these things where, the 18-year-old buys their first quadplex as when they graduate from high school, because then they're renting out the 3 of the quadplex and they're living in one and they've got a roommate and they're paying for they're making money while they own their first property. And I'm like, be thinking about this. And along that lines, this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things that I've found for my kids is I'm trying to be mindful of their future. Right? I didn't have that necessarily same opportunity me growing up. So, like I've started Roth IRAs and whole life insurance policy for them so that they can have these things that will continue to grow for them. But then also with my older girls, I've put them as an additional card on my business card so that they're gaining some credit when they're 14, 15, 16 years old, so that when they turn 18, they've got established credit. They can go and they can do whatever they want with that. And then also, it's like I've said to him, listen, I know some people are sort of mixed on whole life. I think it's one tool in the tool belt. And I'm like, listen, if you put in $250 a month into this whole life insurance policy, like you don't need another policy. You don't need another 401k. You don't need those things. I would say still do them. But in almost any job, they can put in $250 a month.
Yeah.
And when they're 65, they've got a couple $1 million worth of cash value plus a death benefit. And so anyway, that gets into a whole different conversation. But I think as we sort of look at opportunities for our kids, it's small things that we can do now that really benefit them later. My son he's 6 years old and he's a super smart kid. And I just he loves numbers. He's a numbers guy.
He is. He was quizzing me at Lake Powell. Remember that?
Yeah.
He memorized these math problems and they were like complex. I don't even know what kind of math it was, but it was like, if 6x plus 5y equals 30, what does y equal when x equals 2? And he has them memorized. He doesn't really know the algebra, but he has the problems memorized. So he was quizzing me. I'm like,
so I look at him all the time. And I'm like, what would I do for him? Like, what would I do for my kids' opportunities? Because for my daughters, it's a little bit different. I'm not sure what they want to do as far as into a business side of it yet.
Yeah.
But for Preston, it feels a little easier because he loves numbers. He's a very social guy. And I'm like, I really just want him to be able to do like an internship with with a couple of guys I know that do venture capitalism and real estate investment, so that early on he can say, hey, this is appealing to me or it's not appealing to me. Dad, leave me alone. Let me just go work at Office Depot or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. But if I can provide him that opportunity so that when he's 40 or 45, he's not only enjoying what he's doing, but maybe he's looking at the tail end of his career already. Because if we can give our kids that step up, and a little bit of knowledge about the path, then I think so much the better for them. So much the better.
That stuff gets me excited because I'm about to have my first kid.
Yep. Soon.
And I'm just thinking, oh man, how can I start a business for her when she's 10 years old? And
absolutely.
And I don't know. I just want my kids to have businesses instead of jobs. Like jobs taught me hard work.
Yeah.
But honestly, a kid can run a business. They'll fail, but that's part of the plan.
Well, and
they'll fail at 10 or 24.
Well, and I think one of the things there are combinations out there, like your brother Matt, right? So he's got a business, and I think he's got a job now too, right? Did he take that painting job? He
basically has the painting internship in the temple that he lined up, plus his painting business.
Right.
And the painting internship was like a paid job. So
right. So, but the benefit of that is the fact that you're learning a skill, getting paid to learn a skill that you're going to use in your other ventures, right?
Right.
And just like that, it's easy sometimes to get stuck in this river. You floating the raft down the river, like you guys are talking about, and I think a lot of people would say, "Well, I've got a great job working for a painter, working the temples. I'm going to always have a steady job. Or you can say, hey, this is a skill that I really want to learn. And somebody's willing to be able to pay me because I'm working for them while I learn it. And then take that and improve the other parts of your life. For instance, my middle daughter, Hannah, worked at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And Chick-fil-A was a great job for her because they are very process oriented. And I remember I'd go pick her up after work because she's working there when just after she turned 14, and I'd go pick her up, and I'd see her behind the counter, and she would be taking care of customers. And you walk in, and behind the register, there's signs, there's motivational signs about, we do a good job, we greet our customers. And it was all this very positive process. So I thought, what a great job for my 14, 15-year-old daughter to be able to have, working for a big company that has processes about being efficient and customer oriented, and just teaching her to be efficient in her time and value that time at work. So I think that all of those, there's not a lack of opportunity if you do go get a job that is, corporate America,
right?
Whatever it is, take from everything the opportunity to be able to learn something.
Absolutely. I think I think it's really cool what you're doing with your kids, and I think it's going to carry forward in their life for a really long time. I mean, just seeing you as a dad and with all these businesses, and you're in the ER, speak a little bit about how do you manage your work-life balance and also delegation, because that's a skill that I've observed in you that I want to hit on too.
I will say this. It's something I had to learn because when I went to medical school, I didn't understand the work-life balance very well. I went to medical school. I'm like, listen, I want to be one of the top students. I just really want to excel. I want to learn all this stuff. We had my first daughter a month into medical school. Ooh. And then we had my second daughter 18 months later. And it's like, I'm a second-year med student. And I was like, at first I was like so I went to the VCOMS, Virginia Tech Medical School, and I would go when the school would open up at like 7:00 in the morning, and I would come home when it would close at midnight. And I did that 5 days a week, and I was kind of annoyed when the school would close at 8:00 on Saturdays, and I'd be like, well, this really sucks. Why can't I stay here and study more? And then on Sundays, for me, Sundays was a day off.
Off limits,
I promised God that I was like, well, not really promised, but I was kind of like, I needed his help. I knew I needed his help. And so I was like, I'm going to not study on that day. But even during medical school, though, I worked. And I worked a lot of Sundays doing organ and tissue recovery. But so, I mean, the part of that story that pertains here is the fact that it took me a little while to be able to figure it out, because I remember coming home and my oldest daughter really didn't like me because I'd come home on the weekends and I'd be like, come dad. And she's like, who the heck are you? And I've got several pictures of her holding her arms out, trying to reach to her mom, crying, because I'm like, I just want to hold you. I just want to hang out. And so I had to say, well, guess what? I bet if I go home every day at 5, spend a couple of hours at home, have dinner, put kids in bed, go back to the school at 8, study until midnight, I bet you that 3 hours really won't affect my grades very much, really won't affect the overall process. And it didn't, maybe you get an A- instead of an A in medical school, right? Well, guess what? That's great.
You just have to pass.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
No.
That's what, that's what they say. They say, what do they call the doctor, the guy who finished last in his medical school class? Call him doctor. Right, so like, as long as you're going through the process, it does depend upon what you want to do as far as how competitive you need to be. But I did need to figure that out. I had to figure out that time at home was super valuable. And I think that as there have been times that I've forgotten that. And when I started up at Remote Health Solutions, it's a telemedicine business that I own. We started that up probably like 5.5 years ago now, something like that.
Yeah.
And
was this one of the first, or is there?
No, that's kind of
the tissue company.
In the middle.
Yeah, we did
that first.
Yeah, that was probably the first. The
was that during medical school?
I started that as an intern. So like when I was finishing medical school is when I first started saying, I think we can start this business. My dad had just sold a small business. And so we started Baugh Medical Organization to be able to make wooden prosthetics. So they're called post-mortem prosthetics. They're basically wooden bones to be able to put in cadavers after they've had their long bones recovered for organs and tissue recovery, so that they would look normal for a viewing or funeral.
Oh, I see.
And so my dad had just sold a little business, and it ended up it turned really, really south, and they ended up basically getting nothing out of the deal. So I said, well, we can do something. And I'd been in the industry once again, right? That's the key. Like I took a knowledge that I had. I was working as an organ and tissue recoverer, and we were using PVC pipe and we were using wooden dowel to replace these bones when we would send it back to the mortuary. And then there was a couple of companies out there making some manufactured ones. And I said, I think that we can make one that's better. And so we spent a couple of years. My dad and I would mail back and forth across the country these wooden bones, be like, and I would say, hey, listen, I think it needs to be longer here, or it needs to be wider there.
Wow.
It needs to move over here better. And so we went through a bunch of sort of prototypes in the process of starting this business. And so, but it kind of started when I was just finishing my 4th year of medical school, and then during my internship, and then the first part of my residency is when we turned to that from like we're figuring stuff out to making it a business. And then, and personally for me, I started that business really with one purpose, and that was to be able to give my parents an income and a job, something to be able to do. Yeah. And so it paid some bills for them. And then we ended up hiring, a couple of my sisters ended up working for me. My brother worked for me for a while, and my sister's ex-mother-in-law and a couple of community members. And I think, we had about 10 employees. So it's still a really small business. And truthfully, it just sort of paid its bills. But for me, that was, that's all that it needed to do. It just
paid payroll, which was your parents.
Yeah, it paid payroll. And then it also, as much as anything else too. I get patients in the ER who know my parents, right? Because I'm a local guy, and
your parents still live here too.
Then my parents still live in Hurricane, and so they'll come in and they say, "Oh yeah, your parents, they have that bone business, right?" Yeah. And I'm like, "Yeah, we actually just sold it back in January," but for them, they were very proud of that too. It's kind of a unique thing that they would talk about, and so that was sort of an additional purpose. But it employed several people, and then we sold it. And the nice thing is, kind of like you talk about legacy, we sold it as Baugh Medical Organization, and so we sold our patents and we sold those things with it, and it's kind of a cool, exciting thing. But yeah, I started that. Probably like 2009 is when we started that.
Yeah, that makes more sense, because I was thinking when I read a lot about you beforehand in that business, I'm like, why looks like he's started several businesses and had a lot of ventures, a lot going on. I'm like, why did he finish medical school? It's like it makes a little more sense.
Well, yeah, exactly what we talk about, because I think it's interesting. I've said that I've kind of given this advice to several people, but there was one of my fellow residents. And so there's a difference too between finishing medical school and finishing residency as far as like what you're capable to do, right? So you can be a doctor when you finish medical school, but unless you finish at least a year, and in some states 2 years of post medical school training, internship, residency, then you can't ever practice medicine. You never be board eligible or board certified for anything. And so right. Could you really, like, you can't really get your license in any state, I think, until at least you finish 1 year post graduation training. And so I had a good buddy in residency. He was like, we were like 3 months from being done, and he was just feeling burnt out. He's feeling like he was just getting hammered every day. He was sick and tired of it. We were going to graduate at the same time. And he's like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to drop out. I got a lot of family back in the Carolinas. I'm just going to move back there. No. I was like, man, just wait. Like, if you do whatever you got to do, like hold your breath for 6 months. If you got to hold your breath for 6 months, tread water, whatever it is, because if you stop now, your options are limited by 90%. If you continue on for 3 more months of just pain and misery, even then you have all these opportunities. Even if you never practice medicine in an ER ever again, right? That's what I told him. I said, even if you never practice medicine in ER after you graduate from residency, your opportunities are greater than if you stop now.
Wow.
So I think that like being able to this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is, I think, smart advice. I tell people all the time. You guys are the exception, right? But the generation, I think, really my generation and under, things that we're not overall learning anymore are delayed gratification, hard work, and the fact that a little bit of pain is okay and maybe even necessary. And those 3 things, I think, are not just about business. They're about life in general. And they're about how do you deal with sickness and health, and how do you deal with hardships in your marriage? How do you deal with all of these things? How do you deal with your kids? Delayed gratification, hard work, and the fact that a little bit of pain is okay. Those are sort of a mantra in my mind all the time.
Those are huge.
And if we can reteach those things to the upcoming generations, then I think we get a little bit more of the classic American greatness back too.
I love it. The American greatness is what we need. And I think that if our kids can have those principles in them, they'll have the advantage, right? Because they'll be, instead of being, it's always been the minority. Maybe in the olden days, it was 40 out of 100 people had that, good delayed gratification. Now it's like 5, right?
Yeah.
And in 20 years, maybe it's only like 1 or 2. And so almost like being doing business in a recession, you have an advantage because everyone else is scared to do it. Same thing for our kids. If they can have that delayed gratification, pain, and all those things that are a part of who they are, they're going to thrive.
When you think about your kids, though, being able to, for me at least, being able to find that balance of teaching those principles is hard. Because you say, well, listen, I want my kids to be able to have things that I didn't have, right?
Yeah.
I want them to have greater opportunities, and I want them to have the advantages that I didn't have, but yet I want them to learn these principles. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that that saying. This is, hard times create strong man. Strong man, that leads to
good times.
Good times, which leads to softer children, which leads to hard times again, right? And it's just this kind of cycle that where as we become successful, is very purposeful.
Yes.
So one of the things that I'm striving with my kids is to be able to just kind of find ways to keep them grounded. Because I'm a 1%er. Right. And so that means that there are opportunities that we get. Like we're going to go to Hawaii next week. Why? Just because I saw a good deal. Right. Nice. So we're going to go to Hawaii.
Yes.
But yet, I want them to understand how important and how valuable those things are. So in October, we're going to go to Ghana. And I'm taking my kids with me. I've been on a bunch of medical service missions, and I've always gone just really poor, destitute places. I went to Ghana last year, and we're going to go back to Ghana. And this year, I'm taking my kids because I'm like, I want them to understand that we're going to go and work with a bunch of people that live in a third world country, where they really have so very little resources. And we're going to stay at the orphanage where we're going to be serving. They're going to be spending a week with, 50 some odd orphans who live there, plus a bunch of volunteers and stuff. Yeah. But I want my kids to be able to understand that, listen, you're very, very blessed. And that doesn't mean that I don't want you to have those things. I just want you to appreciate those things. Yeah. Which, it's like my middle daughter right now. I'm kind of dealing a little bit with her because she'll just send me a text message. Hey, Dad, can you buy this from Amazon? Hey, Dad, can you buy this from Amazon? Hey, Dad, can you buy this from Amazon? Amazon's so easy, right? You say yes. Well, I want her to have those things.
Right.
So there's not anything bad that she's saying. Hey, listen, buy me a kilo of cocaine. Dad, what do you think? And instead, it's like, hey, I need a new suitcase. Well, great, that's awesome. Hey, Dad, I need a new tennis bag. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, Dad, I need new tennis skirts. Okay, that's awesome. But there comes with that, and it's a hard balance to be able to find
I bet.
between saying, listen, I can afford this. I want this for you. And I want you to understand that it's valuable too.
And how do you have them earn it, right? Because I know someone, I'm thinking of someone specific where they are very successful entrepreneurs, kind of like the hard times created them into great men. And their kid, they basically want the world for them. And so they tried to start a business for them. They bought all the equipment, over $100,000 of investment into the business. And the kid just has no motivation to run the business that they basically hand them.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very, very tough to balance it. I don't know how I'm going to do it because I'm so eager. I'm so eager to provide my kids with everything. And especially like a business, I could see myself saying, oh, let's get enthusiastic about this business I'm going to start for you. And they don't even want it,
Yeah.
And that's a full grown man. That's not like a teenager. That's like someone in their late 20s anyways. But I see the dilemma there.
Right, you read my mind because that was one thing that came to my mind, and you ended up just answering one of my questions: is how do you balance that? Because on one hand, what you went through growing up, financially and with your family. I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, but it probably is a huge moment of decision, like why you wanted to go into medical school, because you could be very high paying, very lucrative job. But it's like the trials and troubles you went through growing up is what drove you to be who you are and maybe again, you can answer for yourself, but it's like gave you that motivation, that drive, because you like wanted to be top of your class. Like you wanted to literally go and be the best and create this new life. But then you turn around with your kids and you're like, I want to give you everything that I didn't have. But then you're like, what if this hurts them?
Yeah.
Because now I'm giving them things that I debate in my mind, because my wife will talk about like, I want to save up for like our children's college. I'm like, I don't want to save up for their college. Like I want them to figure that out. But I don't know if that's wrong of me to think that way. I'm just
so those are very interesting conversations to be able to have and to be able to thought process of where is that line of helping
right
to hurting. For instance, so I'm divorced. I've been divorced a little over 3 years now. And my ex-wife, she grew up very comfortably, not wealthy, but very comfortable. And her school was all paid for by her dad, and mine was not. Like I worked during school, and I took out some loans in undergrad and paid those off, and I obviously took out loans for medical school. But so we had that conversation a lot. Like, well, where do we? What is the right thing? Do we pay for school for them so that they can focus on school? Do we pay for school and require them to be able to buy their books? Do we help them, buy a duplex to be able to live in it when they go to school so that they can have some, like all those are, and there's no right answer. I think everybody has to be able to figure that out for them and for their own situation, their own scenario. But I think that the mindfulness of it is probably the most important part. Right, it's the fact that you're keeping these things in mind, and probably even having conversations with your kids. Because I do try to have conversations with my kids about it. Like, they'll say, "Hey, if you die, how much money do we get?" I'm like, "None. You don't get any money. Like this. Like it's all. You don't right now. You don't get any money. So like there's no motivation for you to push me off the back of the boat when we go water. So we have those conversations, right?
Who asked it? Tell us.
Well, I've been asked that by I think all my
all
kids.
Of them?
All of them, yeah. Just all of them. Yeah. So, but I think the mindfulness of that planning process for your kids is super important, because otherwise you're just going to be swimming down a channel.
Well, you don't want to rob them of a pressured situation,
right?
Because I look at I look back at that moment, and maybe it was a series of moments, but that moment where you said, "Hey, my family's business deal didn't go the way we wanted it to. I have to put the family on my back." Right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm the adult now. I'm the one who's going to carry the family through. And that moment I see as a pivotal part of it. At least if I can pick one out.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think that one was right. That was a moment, and there's a couple of things that I've been thinking about as we've been talking for the past couple minutes. One, like how did I sort of get pointed in that direction, and how did I change, and how was I different from my family? One, I think when I was growing up, I had my nuclear family, but then I had a couple of really, really good friends whose families' financial and educational backgrounds were very different than mine. And I made purposeful decisions to emulate some of their family things, to be able to get an education, to be able to look at success from an outside source. And I mean, these are folks that I called mom and dad because I was in their houses so much. And so I think that is one thing, right? And then you talk about, well, when was this pivotal moment? There was a couple of times, as I kind of looked at the progression of, my success, my financial success, and then also sort of success in life. When that happened, when my parents had sold a business and things turned out poorly, I remember really thinking, well, what am I going to do? How are we going to do this? And we started this business, and it took a couple of years. And I know my parents kind of during that same time period had wanted to start up a bed and breakfast. And so they had worked out a deal with, and I was like, man, this doesn't sound like a good idea. But they got underwater, and they lost that opportunity with the bed and breakfast. They spent a bunch of money that they didn't have, and then they got in trouble with their house that they did have, and then they lost that house, and I was not in a financial position at the time to be able to help. Wow. And I remember thinking at that time, if I could help, I would do something about this. And then it was shortly after that I moved back to the area. And then, then I was finished residency and I was making more money, and I probably could have helped then.
Right.
But I do remember that there was a transition, because you said, well, now you're the adult, right? I did become the adult. And, in some ways, I felt like the patriarch now.
Right.
And I became, because now I was my dad's boss. I was helping out things financially. I was kind of guiding and directing. And I remember my dad would come to me for answers to questions, not just about, not medicine, but like, well, what about this at the shop? And what about this as far as design? What about this with the business? What, I've been talking to your mom, and that transition that, I really didn't like that, honestly. I wanted my dad to continue to be dad.
Yeah.
And so I remember also in that situation, I kind of had this purposeful step back a little bit, like we'd get together and it'd be kind of like, no, listen, you're the head of the family. Like you make these decisions. And that was a very purposeful decision as well. And because I felt it was kind of like off kilter a little bit. I felt it was not the natural balance, and so it was kind of pushed back a little bit to my dad. Now he's aging a little bit more, and he's a little older, and some of that's kind of shifting back a little bit. But at that time, there are some times in your life and your relationship with your parents that things may change. That relationship does change, and it goes from being a kid to being a grown adult, and then being an equal, and then maybe being the responsible one, and all of those progressions are natural and can be great, but I think they should just be purposeful. I think you should look at those and say, what am I doing, and what's the end goal?
Well, exactly. I think it's a theme that has come about in my mindset and in my life a lot lately. Just being the adult, you brought up the word patriarch, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm the one who has to protect this group's dreams and their well-being. And so we even preach it in my company now. Like, I have my managers and my team members. I say, look, in any situation, you're the adult. If you're with a customer, they're older than you, you still have to be the adult in every situation, right? We talk about it with my wife and her relationships. It's like, something comes up. It's like, honey, you're the adult. You got to be the adult. It doesn't matter if they're older than you, if they have more credentials than you. And I think it's probably a part of your personality because you work a lot in the ER in trauma, right? And so you have to keep cool because the patient's well-being depends on you being able to keep cool and delegate, and you're protecting their health. And it carries over into a professional setting where you have all these businesses and all these people depending on you. And if you can step up and be the patriarch of, not just of the family, but the business, any interaction, if you're the adult with the maturity and the emotional control, that pays off big.
Well, the step off of that, the connection from that is, you talk about being in the ER, and I think that this goes into, and I think that this speaks this kind of the same thing. In the ER, there's this sort of this mentality that says, you're the captain of the ship, right? And
yes.
So the captain of the ship sets the tone for the ship, right? And so I'm in the ER. I'm a guy that when the crap hits the fan, like 99 times out of 100, I'm gonna be like, okay, let's slow it down.
Yeah.
Everybody, check your pulse. It'll be okay. Let's make these decisions. Let's move forward. Let's do all the right things. But if you're the captain of the ship in whatever arena you're at, home, work, softball, and
everything,
you're screaming and you're going crazy and whatever it is, like either people are not going to follow you or they're going to follow you and it's going to be screaming and crazy. But instead you say, hey, let's just slow it down. Everybody take a pulse check and let's do what we need to do, and let's do it in a smart way. I do think about that a lot.
Huge takeaway.
In fact, this is maybe an additional tangent, but one of the things I think about a lot, we're thinking about how do I practice medicine, and then also what has that meant as far as the rest of my life. When I was I worked as a surgical tech in the operating room, and most of that time I spent in orthopedics. And I really was like, man, I'm going to go into surgery. I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's what I'm going to do. And God really just had another plan for me. He really did. And I had great rotations. I went all of these great places, and it was amazing. I loved operating, and in truth, I didn't match into orthopedics. I was told, hey, listen to what you're going to do. And I didn't match into orthopedics. I went and did this internship, and my mentor was an ER guy. And I spent a lot of time with him, and his name was Steve Mitchell. And I remember saying, hey, Steve, you've been doing this a long time. And I said, I think he'd been an ER doc 18 years at that point. And most ER burnout is about 10 years for most people.
Interesting.
So he'd been doing this for 18 years, and he was in a busy ER, and he seemed happy when he came to work. He enjoyed what he did. And I said, how do you do it? How do you come to work every day, busy ER? In our line of work, we deal with the dregs of society, by and large, right?
Yeah.
And
I've heard.
And so he said, well, John, there's a few things, and I think about this all the time, and I share this quite a bit. He said, have something else, right? Have business, have another business, have church, have family, have something else that when you leave here, there's something else to be able to occupy your mind, so you're not just thinking about work all the time. You're not thinking about the ER and thinking about the things you could have done or should have done or whatever else. And then he said, when you're here, do the things you got to do to be able to sleep well at night. So he says, come here and work hard.
Yeah.
And I sort of add into that, I'm going to make decisions that I can sleep with. And so maybe it's order a few more tests. Maybe it's add a CT that somebody else wouldn't do. But I just want to be able to do the things that I don't feel like I'm missing things, right?
Very thorough.
Very thorough. And then he said, when you go home, leave it at work. As an ER guy, you can do that. I don't own a pager. We take call once a month, and it's just kind of backup call for the ERs. I'm not taking call for patients. In case the ER gets really busy, then I need to go in. But it's once a month. And then the final thing that he said to me is he said, don't expect anything of your patients. Don't expect them to know the medicines that they're taking. Don't expect them to have followed the advice you gave them when you saw them 3 days ago. Don't expect them to know who operated on them yesterday. Just don't have any expectations. Just take care of them.
Yeah.
And so when I lower my expectations for those scenarios, then it really helps. It kind of just brings my level of, my level of expectation comes down and my level of frustration comes down too.
Yeah.
Because if you have this expectation, like, well, gosh, you got diabetes. You've had diabetes for 27 years. maybe you should stop eating the Twinkies and Ding Dongs. Well, instead, just realize, well, they're there with high blood sugar and they feel horrible, and maybe they're DKA. And I'm just going to take care of you instead.
Yeah.
So I do try to be able to have that application into other parts of my life, but it's also balanced with, I want to have expectations from other people in my life. I want to have expectations from my kids. I want to have expectations from, my spouse. I want to have expectations that are reasonable and right. So you just have to temper those things. But when you talk about happiness at work, I think those principles really go across a broad spectrum of jobs and careers and businesses.
Sports, life, everything.
Yep, exactly.
And that I did I was calling your business partner before. I was like, okay, like, what stands out to you about Jon that you would say? And that came up, as Rob, he said a bunch of things, but one thing he just kept coming back to was critical thinking, problem solving. And I think that, I see that carrying from the medical, from the ER into business as you form teams and as that's probably a big trait that's carried over into both.
Yeah, I think so. But and the thing too is, that's a learnable skill for people too, to be able to be mindful of looking at problems in their life. And you can either say, well, I see problems, or you can say, I find opportunities.
Right.
And that's what I think I've tried to do a lot, is to be able to, that's how I've started every business that I have started. There has been some problem, and found a solution. And then the implementation of that gets to be the real business side of it too. It's like, well, how good are you at implementing that? And at times me and my teams that have been involved have been not very good, and other times we've been pretty good. And I wish I was as good of a implementer as the paparazzi guys with selling $5 jewelry for to $500 million. It's like the implementation is a big part, but kind of the initiation of being able to identify problems and find a solution, I think, is helpful in life overall.
Right. And that's why your ER guy lasted 18 years.
Yeah. Because
most people burn out, and he actually, you asked him for his advice because he had the track record.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just, it made me think when you're talking about that I read a book from, about Dr. Russell M. Nelson.
Yeah.
And they talked about his operating room and how it was just completely different from anywhere else. And that just reminded me of you and what you're describing. I really admire that. And I'm grateful that we have good doctors like you that are able to keep that emotion and that level head. I was thinking like, okay, well, how, like, did you develop that over time? Like, how did you learn to control those emotions? Were you always like that? Or you can even remember the last time that you may have gotten too emotional, and it's
Yeah, those times still happen, right? Like
I'm sure, yeah. Geez.
And you're not allowed to ask my children when the last time was, because those are more frequent at home, because my expectations are different at home too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But if and it is funny because in the ER, if you talk to the nursing staff, they'll be like, oh, and it's like, oh, I've seen Dr. Baugh get upset before. But it's kind of like that's the rarity, because it's a very, very purposeful decision. But it was actually one of the things that it's funny how events in our childhood shape us as adults, right? So I think I was kind of a loud kid. I kind of was
really
outspoken, and and in some ways, I think probably kind of annoying, like too busy, too loud, like kind of precocious. And I remember being on a bus trip, like we were like going somewhere, like or like a class trip somewhere, but it was like an overnight class trip. And I remember being on a bus, and I don't remember, maybe I was like 8th grade or something like that. And I remember just kind of talking, and it was late, and 90% of the bus was sleeping, and the bus driver was one of our teachers, right? And I remember him just saying, "Baugh, be quiet," And I remember, and I just remember thinking, like, do I have a really loud voice or something, or is it my voice just like super annoying or whatever it was? And I thought a lot about that during my life, because I not long after that was when I kind of made some purposeful decisions about, hey, listen, I want to be a little bit more calm. I want to be a little more mellow. So, I look at my 6-year-old right now, and I'm like, man, he's something.
He's off the walls. He's cute, but he has a ball of energy.
He's something. And so while I get frustrated with that, I also think, well, when I was 6, I'm pretty sure I was exactly the same. I think he's a carbon copy of me. And so while I am different now overall, I don't know that I want him to be different now. I want him to be different later. But the things that shaped me to be who I am some of them were involved with me being this high energy, kind of rambunctious kid. And then those just kind of morph over time.
It takes you far in life when you have that energy and you can curb it back. Because I see a lot of that myself too, because I'll see kids do something or teenagers do something, and we'll shake our head at it, but then I'll tell my wife, like, yeah, but I used to do the same thing.
The exact same thing.
Like
exactly.
that, like, how can I can blame adults for doing dumb stuff, but like, I can't blame kids for doing anything dumb, because I was 100% there. Yeah. Okay, I still do dumb stuff as an adult. But the principle is the same, and I think when I see this kid, we have this neighbor, and my parents have this neighbor, his name is Parker, and he's just the same way, full of energy. And he's always, he's not being mean, but he's always bumping into the other kids and wanting to play basketball and stuffing his little brothers. I'm like, that kid's going to be a varsity athlete someday. He's going to go far, because I can see the drive already. He's out there playing basketball. Everyone else is on his iPad. It's like, he probably stuffed his little brother one too many times, but he's going to go.
But yeah. And some of that comes with temperance later, right? The drive and then temperance later. This takes one step back, but you talked about President Russell M. Nelson. Mm-hmm. So where I first worked in medicine, where I worked as a scrub tech, it was where he had operated at LDS Hospital. He had operated there. And so I actually had the opportunity to work with people who had worked with him when he was still operating. Okay. And there was a really interesting story that I heard from this general surgeon who had worked with him. I think when this physician was like a resident, he was scrubbing a heart case with President Nelson, with Dr. Nelson at the time. And he's, so he said, they because he was this pioneer in cardiothoracic surgery. So they had done this big cardiothoracic surgery, and they were closing up, right? So they're sewing everything back together, and you go kind of layer by layer. And one of the things you do in the operating room is you keep track of things, you count things. And so you count sponges, and you count instruments, and you count sutures, you count all these things, so you make sure that nothing's left inside. And so they got up, and they had wired the chest closed, and they were closing up the skin, and the nurse was like, "Hey, listen, Dr. Nelson, we're missing a sponge still." He said, "Well, keep counting." And they're still closing. They said, we've counted like a couple of times. We're missing a sponge. And he said,
it's like a Grey's Anatomy episode.
And so he says, okay, and sponges in the OR have a little radio opaque tag on them, so you can take an X-ray. So they bring the X-ray machine in, they take an X-ray, and sure enough, it's still inside the sponge, right? So there's this sponge inside. And the standard answer for most surgeons is, one, blame somebody else, right?
Yeah. Right.
So this is somebody else's fault. Mm-hmm. And the other is to blame somebody else with lots of profanity and anger, right?
Two options.
Yeah.
Blame someone
or blame with anger. Yeah. And I remember very much this guy that I was working with said, so they get this X-ray, they see it back there, and President Nelson or Dr. Nelson at the time says, "Shoot, well, let's go get it." And it was just that simple. Like, just clip the wires, open it up, and let's go. Like, why bring anger to the situation of something that just needs to happen anyway?
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to change anything for you. You're going to have to go do it. You can be angry about doing it, or you can just go do it.
Easier said than done, but
easier said than done.
But very valuable to practice.
Well, I love that. I mean, one of my favorite books of all time that changed my life was Jocko Willink wrote a book called Extreme Ownership.
Okay.
Have you never heard of it? But
they changed your life. I should read this book.
Yeah. It did. I won't go into that all the way, but it's pretty powerful. I mean, he was a Navy SEAL that like basically pioneered a lot of the warfare that and anyways, but that's what it reminds me of is the idea is to have extreme ownership over everything. What that means is it all comes back to me. If I am if you're the it all comes back to me. It just trying to get away from the victim mindset and being, okay, well, maybe I didn't train that person well enough, or maybe I should have said this at this time, or, you take that extreme ownership in life and it'll take you places. It's interesting. There's a lot more context to kind of get the actual point, but, since you've been talking, I've been thinking about just like, one thing I admire so much about physicians and doctors, and even just you getting to know you more and who you are, and just that ability to, you kind of just master yourself, more. And you see that a lot with doctors more than you do with other professions. And it comes back to what you were saying earlier of the delayed gratification, the hard work, and what was the third one?
A little bit of pain is okay.
And pain, a little bit of pain. Maybe it's like, what you do to get there and how it morphs you or how you change and become just, because I think back to his book, President Dr. Russell Nelson's book, it's just, a lot of the people that talked about him, they said like he was a master of his self. Mm-hmm. Like he had total control of his self. Like he was in charge. And where a lot of people, they can't say that. They can't say they're in charge of their emotions and, so anyways, pretty cool.
The sort of the interesting thing along that sort of two aspects of physicians kind of being that the process of becoming a physician. One, I think that this happens in many industries, but you can also be shaped by that process into sort of a negative way, right? So when I was working as a scrub tech, I worked with, 150 surgeons over during the course of my time and training and everything. And one of the things I remember thinking is, just because you go to medical school doesn't mean you have to be a certain thing, right? That process of becoming doesn't have to shape you. Cause I knew, really good surgeons who were really nice guys. I knew really good surgeons who were total jerks. I knew really bad surgeons who were nice guys. I knew really bad surgeons who were slow and mean. And you're like, well, gosh, you got a combination of three bad things. You're slow, bad, and mean, right?
Yeah.
So I still think as you go through that, through whatever it is, you still have an opportunity to be able to choose, because you can become a physician and still be lazy, to a certain extent, right?
For sure.
But or you can be a really, really hardworking garbage man. I'm just whatever it is, right? And be successful at the implementation of the controlling of yourself. There's no rules that say you have to be or act a certain way to fit into a form or a mold. Instead, you get to make these decisions along the way, and because this is what I want to be, and these are the steps I'm going to become that.
Yeah, it's who you are, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to lose who you are to be what you want to be.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. It comes back to, like you said, you could this path could take you down a different road, but it's like, no, I don't need to, and maybe in a negative way, like you said, or
Well, a lot of professions are associated with negative things.
Yeah.
Right? Lawyers,
Yeah.
cop, like everyone loves cops, but sometimes they have hard marriages statistically. Like you don't have to be a statistic no matter what profession you choose.
yeah, you could be the outlier.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of thinking along that line. So I pull out my old tattered wallet, right? But in my wallet, I have when I was in medical school. I remember went to this little Chinese restaurant, and I got this little fortune cookie, right? And I put it in my wallet. It's gone through a couple of wallets. So this was probably in 2006, right? I mean, you guys were in like elementary school or something? I don't know. It's like, but so this fortune cookie says, "Don't forget to do good deeds as you accumulate wealth." And I just thought, well, for
What
me,
year did you get it?
2006.
that's probably
2006?
Probably
For
like
real?
2006.
Okay.
Yeah. You thought I was joking. No, really, no, really, it was like 2006.
I just see you as younger than that. Okay.
But so I think about that because the principle that it is not when you become wealthy, not when you become successful, do you then do good things for other people, but as you are accumulating wealth, and you have the ability to be able to do good things, because it doesn't say donate money as you accumulate wealth. It says do good deeds, and that's really that's something that's plays in the back of my mind a lot. Am I doing good deeds as I'm being successful? One of my business partners, Adam, with the telemedicine business, Adam Hardage, he has a motto that says, do well while doing good. And so, we have a business that helps people,
Right.
but it's an income earner, right? It earns money. And so it's okay. I think that that's okay. Do well while doing good. We do good things, and we try to help people, all across the country, but it's earning money for us. So do well while you do good.
You provide value, then the money comes.
Yeah.
I love that because, I've been around the mindset of how like money is bad, and I've been around that where I've people who they look at others that have wealth or are well off financially, and they judge them in a negative way, or they look down upon them, or they think that they must have some sort of evil in their heart. And it might be mind-blowing to think that, but like it's true, a lot of people do think that way of others, but it's over the years it's realizing that it's a tool, and for you to create these opportunities, and to do the things you've done in your life, but you have way more freedom and way more ability to do good than, let's say, me right now, and it's, which I think is a very cool thing. Mm-hmm. I used to really look up to Dr. Perry in our ward. He's an orthopedic surgeon in town. He was my bishop too, but he was like a huge, I always like looked up to him because at the end of the day, I'm like, he has the ability to do so much good and to change so many people's lives, and so much more than, he has a lot more freedom too, and that's why I admire like him and what he does, and working hard and being able to use his wealth for good. And also just like looking up to the fact where, he's got freedom. Hey, if he wants to go to Africa tomorrow and, go feed a village or something, I say that when you shoot elephants and stuff, they usually feed a village. If he wants to go feed a couple villages, he can, but like, he's got the freedom to do that. But that came because of all the hard work and, everything before that got him to where he is. And so I always thought about people trading off the now for the later, meaning like, oh, well, like I want to party now and I want to go have fun now and stuff, and maybe not doing like taking school or business or work or something seriously, so that later in life you have much more freedom.
Some of the most, some of the guys that I follow on Instagram the most, like sort of influential guys for me, that's one of their biggest things that they preach right now is, until you can truly afford it, you don't need fancy shoes, cars, clothes, house, etc. until you can truly afford it. And then once you can afford it, then it's great and it's fun. You can do those things, but it is trading the now for the future, delayed gratification once again.
Delayed gratification.
Yeah. So you're already teaching the principle.
Big time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, tell us what's next for you. I know that you have all these, you have your ER shift coming up and you have all your businesses, but what's the future for you?
Oh man, I don't know. You talk about your 5-year plan, and I think kind of the same things. Like,
Yeah, that's good. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think about that is because I have like several things in the works, right? Kind of always, whether more different businesses,
right,
or even just some investment things, and truthfully, I'm in the process right now of seeing which one of those are going to kind of take my time next.
Right.
What the ultimate goal for me is over the next few years, to be able to do some things that will slow my life down a little bit, truthfully. Good. Just slow it down a little bit. Because I like doing all the things, but I want to be able to have, I want more time with my kids. My
Absolutely.
Oldest daughter is going to graduate
Formative
here in a few
years,
months.
yeah.
And my youngest boy is 6. And, I want to take more trips with my kids. That's
nice.
the truth is that's what I want to do. I'm like,
love it.
I want to go and I want to do fun things with them. And,
yeah.
We've gone to a couple of concerts together and we've gone to trips even stuff like, I have my kids every other week and, it's like, I'm always like, well, let's go to Zion and let's go for a hike. Let's do this. And, they're typical kids. They're like, oh, this is so lame, Dad. What are we doing? And then, but invariably, whenever we go, by the time that we're there, we go up to Zion and you're there for 20 minutes. And they're like, hey, next time we're here, can we go on that hike? Hey, next time we're here, can we do this? And I think that just being mindful of that, those are the things I want to be doing. I want to be forming more relationships with the right people. And whatever that means as far as outside my kids, we'll see. But, I've got a few business things in the works. I've still got a couple of businesses that, I own or am a partner in or whatever else. And some of those are on autopilot as far as my involvement. Some of them I'm involved with some and like on a day-to-day basis. And then a couple others that we're looking at to be able to start would be sort of an additional kind of like new startup and digging in for a little while. And so I don't know. There's
another hustle.
There's always more things, but I just want to make sure to find the balance in there.
Of course. Love it.
Yeah.
And you dropped some bombs on us today, but is there any other takeaways that you'd say you've learned in your life that would apply to anyone listening that you would say you kind of hang your hat on as principles you live by?
I've mentioned this a little bit, but I think that one of the most important things is be purposeful. Like that's changed who I am, like from my childhood, to where I am now and lots of things in between is be purposeful in your decisions. Like what do I want to do? What are the steps to be able to get there? And I'm a guy that's really been made decisions to be a different person, whether it was, from, Coach Steve getting mad at me on the bus about talking too loud when I was in 8th grade to, going to medical school. But be purposeful, whatever it is. And be willing to, like we talked about, hard work, delayed gratification, and a little bit of pain. Those are really sort of motivating factors for my life overall. And you asked about it a couple of times, but I'm trying to find a balance in there. Trying to find a balance in what you do so that the other parts of your life still work, even if you're busy, successful physician or businessman or whatever it is, find that.
Well, and that correlates well with being purposeful, right? Because if you're trying to find balance, you're really prioritizing your life. And I was listening to this guy who is basically saying, before you plan your work, plan anything that's more important than work into your day first, and then let the balance be towards work.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge takeaway, just being purposeful along with your delayed gratification, accepting the pain and just being patient with life,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes perfectly back to your second year of medical school, right? When you changed to doing that little time with your family from 5 to 8 p.m. and then still hitting the books for 4 hours till midnight.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a powerful lesson for anyone to be able to take away.
Yeah,
Did that guy 3 months away from medical school? He finished, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he finished.
Way to drag him up the rest of the mountain.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of...
You saved his life.
Well, true. Like, man, he was ready to jump off the cliff, and I'm glad he did. I mean, and he's practicing medicine in North Carolina, last I knew, and
Good for him.
and so he's, but that really, like, don't short yourself. You put in a lot of time and effort and energy into whatever it is you're doing, and sometimes it's a matter of learning to know that when you cut bait, but a lot of times it's like, hey, listen, I'm almost there.
Right.
And let me just finish this up. My business partner, Adam, one of the bit of advice that he got recently, he's got his MBA, and we've got a couple of business mentors that still guide us, and one of our mentors had just told him recently, he said, what makes a successful businessman is the guy who figures out how to make it through. Right, like there's going to be those times in every business or every businessman's life, every business person's life, where they're like, man, I just want to throw in my hat, I'm done, throwing the towel.
Oh yeah.
And he said, the successful businessmen are the ones who figure out how to just be able to make it through. Do you need a scale back operation? What do you need to do? Do you need to fire everybody? Do you need to do and just run on bare bones to be able to make through the lean times, so that you're still here, so that you can take success later. Yeah,
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge, because you think the best businessmen are the ones that thrive all the time, but it's
Most
the ones
of
that
them
they can just not quit.
Yeah, right.
So thank you so much for being
thank you
on.
guys.
Yeah.
This
We'll
was
let
ton
you
of
run
fun.
to the ER, but I've had a blast.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna love it. The listeners will be inspired, and we will wrap up another episode of the Beyond Net Worth podcast.
Awesome.
Thanks for
guys.
coming on.
I appreciate it.